Yeah, no, it's perfect. I can hear you now. All right, it's recording, man. So I got Joe Sib on the line. And
you got Joe Sib on the line, bro.
So Joe, first, before we even get started, like, how is this whole comedy thing? Like, how's it going? Like, you're tearing it up with. I see you, opening up for Jim Brewer and doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, how's it going? You're a busy dude.
You know what, man? It's going way. I think the best way to answer that is the fact that it's even going. You know, I didn't start doing comedy I didn't start doing stand-up until I was 44 years old. Or 43 years old. So that's generally, not the time that you're like, hey, I want to start talking into a microphone and really put myself in a situation where I can get punished nightly. It ended up being something that I always had toyed with. I did stand up for a few seconds when I first moved to LA when I was like 23 years old. But music was always my passion and was what I always pursued. But I always wanted to do stand up, and that was something that I always wanted to play around with. And when I ended playing music and was putting that on hold, I want to try something else. A lot of my peers in music were picking up, guitars and playing acoustic, and that's not my thing. I was like, you know what? I'm not that kind of artist / singer. Like, I respect the people that do it because because I guess like when you get older, you kind of just have to not be as punk as you used to be. You kind of have to like slow it down and be a dad. A little bit, and which I think, all the guys that I love, whether it's, the guys like Joey Cape or Chuck Reagan. Chuck Reagan, I mean, he hasn't slowed it down at all, and, he's such an awesome artist. But I realized, I don't have that. And what I always, what I always leaned on my whole entire life was being funny. That's always been my I think that's always been my go-to mechanism for dealing with like any situation that was awkward. Anytime I was in a situation that that I felt nervous in or anything like that, like I just kind of a go-to mechanism for me was always to joke around and make light of it. And when I started toying with the idea of doing stand-up, I was like, you know what, I really want to see this through. But I never anticipated. I thought I would do it a little bit and then kind of it would go away. But now it's been 8 years, and I really dig it, and all these opportunities have come about. And
because it started like recently, right? Where you starting to get bigger opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this. I would say for the first, like 5 years that I was doing stand up, probably the first 5 years, you're really kind of just figuring out like what you want to say, who you want to, because my whole thing was I didn't want to. A lot of times, you see a comedian and they're funny. But at the end of their set, you're like, what did that comedian, that man or woman have to say that I'm leaving with? Like, what's their through line, or what's something that I can take home with me that comedian gave me besides being funny? And I really wanted to if I was going to do it, I was like, I really want to try to do that. I want to have something actually to say, which, probably comes from my background of playing music, all
right,
the bands
because
I love.
You don't just tell like, hey, what are the one knock knock who's there? It's kind of like a storytelling, right?
My comedy, they call it Longform, and it's definitely leaning heavily on stories and situations. And I'm not like a one-line comedian. Like, sure, I have jokes. There's obviously jokes. My intent is to get up there and make people laugh the entire time. Like, I love getting laughs. Like, I'm not one of those guys that, doesn't work at getting laughs. Like, I want to get laughs as much as I can, and I want to build up that bank account of laughs with the audience right away. Like, I really work on that. But, when I'm doing my sets and I get longer time, whether it's getting to do a half hour or doing 20 minutes with Jim Brewer or doing an hour headline set, you're going to definitely know more about me and who I am as a guy, as a father, as a husband, and also you're going to kind of understand why I'm that guy, because I'm going to tell you some stories from when I was a kid that shaped me into the guy that I am today. So
what do you think is harder, doing like a 5-minute set or a 7-minute set or even or the hour long, like you said? Which
it's funny, when I first started, doing 5 to 7 minutes was a nightmare. I was like, how can you be funny in 5 minutes? How can you be funny in 7 minutes? Like, I just was like, there's no way. I can't even get out anything in 5 minutes.
Because it's like an elevator pitch, right? It's sort of.
Yeah, I was like that. It's because it's the way that I explain it to people is the best way to look at it is it's like it's different muscles you're working out as a comedian. When you're doing 5 to 7 minutes, that's a whole different style and a whole different muscle that you're going to work out as a comedian. It's no different than like surfing. It's like if you go shortboarding and you're surfing a beach break and you're going to surf on a different board, you're going to surf a different style. Now, if you go longboarding and you're like, hey, I'm in Mexico or I'm surfing Malibu and there's 3-foot, 4-foot waves, I'm going to have a longer board. It's a different wave. The way it breaks, I'm going to get a longer ride. And you're going to be working a different muscle when you're surfing that wave. So for me, when I originally started, it was easier, or at least it felt like when I had more time, there was more of an opportunity for me and the audience to get to know each other. So that was I felt strongest in that setting. But the more I started doing comedy, and the more that I got into situations where they're like, hey, man, you got 6 minutes. Hey, you're doing 7. Hey, you're doing 5. Hey, you're doing 3 minutes. I realized really quick. I realized right away. I was like, you know what? That's not my strength, and I've got to change that. I got to fix that. So I know this sounds, if you're a comedian, it doesn't sound crazy, but if you're just a normal person listening. So then I would say for 2 years solid, I just worked on getting together a 5-minute set that killed from beginning to end. And then what I started doing is I started even wanting to do less time. Like if someone said, hey, man, do 5 minutes, I would go to another show and do 3 minutes, because I really wanted to be quick and be able to. But the thing is, you don't want to talk quick. You want to be able to be funny, but in a shorter amount of time and pack in a bigger punch in a shorter amount of time. So that was something that I had to really
I think that's kind of like similar to like a 2-minute drill for like football or something, where you gotta score at the end. And I mean, it just seems like a little bit way more difficult to do, just to try to kind of feel out the audience and everything like that. So,
well, the difference is, the biggest thing is this. The hardest thing is this. If you and I were running the 2-minute drill, it was like, all right, dude, here it is. We're 4th and goal, 12 seconds on the clock. I want us to run this play. You have a group of guys that you're like, all right, let's do it. And you run it, didn't work. Run it, didn't work. But see, you're able to practice it at practice, not in a game. So that when it does come to the game, you've ran the play a million times. You know what's going to happen. With stand-up comedy, there's no practicing. You have to get in front of an audience to get good.
That's what I was going to ask.
That's the hardest part. That's the hardest part.
Because you can't just go to your wife and kids or a couple friends and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, they're obviously a little bit biased, right? They're going to tell you kind of, I thought that sounded great. You just go in with that. And then,
but it's also, like you said, like there's just nothing can substitute for a live audience, a group of people in a room, an energy from a group of people in a room. You're dealing with the people serving drinks. You're dealing with the guys feeding people. You're dealing with the one person that's maybe talking a little bit, and you can't set up all those elements in your bedroom and practice to the mirror and expect it to go well.
Exactly.
Even when, and then half the time you'll think something that you'll write something out. Okay, this is the punchline. This is where the laugh's going to happen. But then that night when you go on stage, you start, delivering the line, and then all of a sudden it gets a laugh on another beat that you never anticipated, and you're like, oh wow, I thought the funny was here, but the funny's really here. Then you got to come back the next night and go, all right, now I'm going to move. So it's just an ongoing exercise that you have to practice all the time, and the only thing is you have to practice in front of a live audience.
Right. So can you tell me about a time that you bombed? Do you have anything recent?
For me, I was pretty fortunate that. I've definitely had sets that I bombed, where it didn't go over. I would say though that I was pretty fortunate in the sense that when I started, I'd already had a lot of stage experience from being in a band, from the time I was, 14 years old to, 33 years old. So like I was always on stage, and even before that I was on stage as a kid. So like I never had any like weird moment on stage where it was just like, oh wow, this guy doesn't know how to, carry himself on stage. So that I never had those stories, but I remember opening up for a comedian, Maz Jobrani, in San Francisco at Cobb's, and I remember I was on stage, and it was one of those nights, and it was just one of those things where Maz Jobrani's audience, I hadn't really researched that it was a lot of Middle Eastern and Persian and Iranian, and like a lot of my references to parenting and a lot of my references to just me as a guy, they weren't resonating with the crowd because they were like, it was just two different cultures. And I literally did my first set with him, and I remember it was going so bad that when I ended my set, that night I had brought my son to San Francisco with me, and he was with me, and he comes with me a lot of times when I go on the road. So he was sitting up front, but in the dark, you couldn't really see him. But it was so quiet when I got done, and I said, "Thanks, my name's Joseph." It was so quiet. Then as I walked downstairs, he was sitting at a table right by the stairs, and he said, he goes, "Oh my God, Dad, that was terrible!" And then the whole crowd laughed. Like the biggest laugh I got, like to the point where the house lights, the guy in the back turned the lights up a little bit so that everyone could see. Yeah, that's actually his son, and it was so bad. And I remember just going, "Oh my gosh!" And I went upstairs, and Maz Jobrani, he's like, "Oh," he's all, he was laughing, and he said, "Look, let's fix this." And I had a second show, and then I just changed my material around. And Maz was like, "Hey, that joke you have about your wife? Open up with that. Do more of this material. Do less of that, and you'll be fine." And sure enough, an hour and a half later, I went back, and I had a great set because I retooled it, and that was great. But I've had those moments where you're on stage, and you just realize it's not going well. But it's funny because when I first started, those moments, it's not going well, are they are so huge in your mind, and it sucks. But now you have a set, and for some reason maybe it's not working. It's funny for me now. I almost sit in the moment when it is going bad, and I like to kind of stop for a second, which to me, I'll literally look around the room and really in my mind take a snapshot and try to really remember what's going on right now. Like, why is it that 100 people are not into what I'm doing? And why am I not getting a laugh? And then it kind of resets me to go, okay, let's try a different approach. But now it doesn't freak me out as much. It doesn't. You have a bad set, you're just like, all right, whatever. I'll go do the next set. And I also, when I have a good set, and I'm feeling all like, oh wow, that was amazing, and I'm, and for a second you're like, whoa, like, I'm the man, or like, oh dude, I'm great. Like I don't think about that anymore either. I'm like, you know what, man, you had a good set, get over it. Now you got to do another one. Like, you just got to, even when it's good, you got to put it behind you, and even when it's bad, you got to put it behind you. Because you can't live, in that.
Yeah. So, and then I guess each place that you travel to, everybody has a different demographic, different references, different age groups. You know what I mean? So, a lot of those jokes won't hit. So, do you regularly change up your joke structures, or I guess do you put some in, take one out?
I'm always writing. I mean, my thing is this: I'm always writing. I'm always trying to, even if a joke, let's say you have a joke that's working and material that's working. I'm always trying to switch it up. I'm always trying to move it around. I'm always like, okay, for the most part, I always kind of know in my head when I get up there what I want to close with, because for me, I just need to know like where the emergency exit is, just in case I mean, you know what I'm saying? So closing the set, I always kind of just like to know, all right, that's where I'm going to close. But like, with different cities and different crowds, for the most part, if I'm doing a headlining show, for the most part, the people that are there like know my background, so that's a little bit easier. When you're opening up for Jim Brewer, or an Eric Griffin or a Maj Jobrani or any of those bigger comedians, you tend to have to work a little bit harder because they are not there to see you. They're there to see the headliner. You're really what's kind of in between them and the headliner. And a lot of times those are the best shows because they came knowing nothing about you. And at the end, when you win them over 20 minutes later, that's a real beginning of a relationship with them that's awesome, and that also turns into next time you come through, you're the headliner. Like this, I'm doing a run right now where I'm going to go to Seattle and Portland next week. And the only reason I'm going to Seattle and Portland is because I was up there in July with Jim Brewer, and now I'm going to come back and headline. And all the people that saw me with Jim Brewer, they've been hitting me going, we're looking forward to your show, we're bringing friends, because they saw 20 minutes of me. So they kind of already got a taste of it. So it's that relationship you're always trying to build with the audience.
Hey, how good does that feel? Like, that growing up, I mean, you said you always wanted to be kind of like a comedian. And then, of course, being on stage and a lead singer of bands, it kind of, puts you in a better position than normally, But having this kind of like your next chapter in your life, being a comedian, and then having that kind of, I don't want to say emergence, but I mean, it's kind of like it kind of is, I mean, like your career keeps prolonging.
We don't have to, we can totally be, we don't have to ignore the elephant in the room in the sense that like, because what you're basically saying is, hey, how good does it feel that you're a 50-year-old man?
No,
and that you're traveling to Seattle or Portland or, and you're doing comedy, and what this is the way I think about it, and what you're saying is, hey, you were in a band and you already had a career, dude. You had a great career as a musician. Like, I look at my music career, and I sometimes can't believe that was my career in music. It feels like another lifetime ago. Like all the touring with thank God I got into punk rock, and the fact that I toured with, whether it was the Ramones or Social Distortion or the Circle Jerks, and how much I loved punk rock, and that I was able to do as much as I did, and then at the same extent, the fact that I still got a foot in the game with SideOneDummy Records, and I just went and saw Against Me on Thursday night, and it was awesome, and then and the same thing that you're saying is totally, I think about it all the time. I'm totally, and I know that people use this word all the time, but it's the only word to really describe my feeling. I am so grateful that I am still able and allowed to get on stage, because I've always loved being on stage more than anything. I never wanted to be a producer. I never wanted to be a manager. I never wanted to own a record company. I never wanted to do any of those things. All that I wanted to do was get on stage and lights, audience, microphone in hand, and sweat it out. And you get done, and there's a moment between you and a crowd, and then you're done, and then you move on to the next thing. Like, that's all I ever wanted to do. So the fact that I'm able to do that now at 50 and do it in a whole other capacity, and that people come out, I'm so grateful.
That's what I was saying. Like, for you to stay relevant all these years, like most people can only stay relevant, I guess. I mean, people were relevant to just depending on who you ask, you know what I mean? Like family members and stuff. But I mean, to the public eye, I mean, you've been doing it for, for 30 plus years, you know what I mean? So, I mean, not a lot of people get that opportunity or even can sustain something like that. So that was the point I was trying to get at.
Yeah. And you're totally right. I mean, you nailed exactly the reason that dude, the fact that, you tracked me down to be on your podcast, I don't look at that as like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like, I'm so grateful that someone would even want to take the time to talk to me. And I'm so grateful that people want to come and see me do stand up. And you know what it is? I just don't take any of it for granted. I'll be totally honest with you, because I know that a lot of people, they kind of have their moment, maybe when they're younger, and then it's over, and they're always kind of living like in the past, like, oh gosh, remember 1980 when we toured, or remember the 90s. And I respect that, because I'm not going to lie, it's a lot of work to keep doing it. It'd be a lot easier to drink a couple beers and just sit on the couch, but I'm just not one of those kind of people, and maybe someday I will be, but I've always wanted to keep pushing it.
Yeah, no, you got to keep pushing it. You're a funny dude. Big fan of yours, of pretty much everything that you do. Which I kind of want to go like way back. Do you have time?
Yeah, totally.
Well, so first of all, I know I said I wanted to before we get started, but I just want to appreciate the time that you're giving me. I'm very grateful because I know you're a very busy dude. So taking the time out of your schedule to chat with someone you don't even know. It's very, very cool of you and punk rock, and I love it. So I thank you.
No problem, man. Well, dude, thank you for taking the time to hook it all up.
Yeah. Okay, so you said you had stage presence since you were about like 14 years old, maybe a little bit earlier. But I remember reading into something and then listening to other stuff that you've been on, because obviously I'm a fan. But you were a magician at one point, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell me like anything about that? Like, whenever you watch like David Blaine or something like that, do you go, oh, I already know what he's doing, or you know what I mean?
No. All of the illusionists like David Blaine, which he's insane. It's just that's so beyond me. What it was for magic with me was when I was growing up, I saw the movie Houdini, and it was this movie that was probably made in like, I don't know, the 60s or 70s, probably 60s or 70s. It was with this actor, Tony Curtis, and he's passed away. But it was this movie that was all about Houdini, and as a young kid, like I'm talking like 10 years old, 11 years old, I hadn't discovered music yet or anything, and I was just a kid. And my dad and I watched Houdini, and the whole story of who he was, and also how he died, and everything that surrounded his career, from the posters for the shows, from the building of the escapes that he would do, all the way to the very end of dying on Halloween, and then also saying that he's going to come back and communicate to his wife. Like, it really brought me in, and looking back on it, I think the reason that it drew me in so much, which I didn't know, was those are a lot of elements of like punk rock, and that's really a lot of elements of just rock. Like the posters for those old magician shows, Blackstone and Houdini, Doug Henning. I mean, they really look like rock posters, because they look like posters for like metal bands.
Yeah. They look like Eddie from right? Is that what it?
Yeah.
From Iron Maiden.
Very Iron Maiden looking.
Iron Maiden stuff.
Iron Maiden looking.
Yeah.
And then you tie in. It's one person out there, and that's pretty punk rock. They're going out there by themselves, and they're whether it was Houdini doing escapes, or whether it was the magicians doing a lot of sleight of hand. So just really, as a young kid, I really got into it, and my dad was super supportive of it. And what we would do is every week we would learn a new trick, and we would practice it, and then I would add it to the list of tricks that I was able to do. And then right around the time I was in 5th grade, and this was a real turning point, and it really put me on the path that I didn't even realize I would be doing for the rest of my life. I was in 5th grade, and we used to go to this pizza parlor, and it was called Arts Pizza. It was in Santa Cruz on 41st Avenue and Capitola Road. And we would go there on a Friday night and get pizza and sodas, and all the people would sit around and eat. And I said to my dad one night, man, this would be a great place for a magic show, which I'm sure no one was thinking like, hey, this is a good place for a magic show. Like, no one was looking for card tricks. And my dad was like, you should go back and talk to the owner and see if you could book it. And that was really, as much as, I came back and I did a magic show there and I performed, but really what ended up happening was me walking back there, finding the owner of the pizza parlor, and at 11 years old saying, hey, my name's Joe. Can I perform magic here? I can get a crowd in. I'll tell all my friends,
You're being your own tour manager.
That was really, to be honest, that was really the beginning of what I would be doing for the rest of my life. And that is setting up events and getting people to trust me to do something in a building that they own. And I came back and I did magic. And I did magic like I was really into magic from, I always say, like, from the time I was like 10 to like 13, and right around the time I got into like skateboarding and girls, that was like right when the magic ended. I was just like, you know what? Like, no one's really feeling the scarves right now. and you know what? I'm going to put these away for a while. But I always loved magic, and I still do. And it was just like it was such an old school form of entertainment. And that was something that I've always done.
I think you should have stayed with the flowers, like the roses at least. So like whenever you're doing like cool tricks off a board or something like that, you could turn to the girl and be like, check this out. This is even cooler.
Yeah.
And just bust out your roses.
Yeah.
That's funny, man. Yeah. So after the magician and skateboarding, when did you get into music? What was the first song that you heard that you were like, oh shit, man, like this is life-changing. This is a turning point for me, like just as far as, becoming a teen and then going forward. Because
I'll tell you right now, I know exactly what it was. It was the Buzzcocks, Hollow Inside. It was probably 1982, and I was at Winchester Skateboard Park, and my dad took me there, and I was really into skateboarding, but I'd never skateboarded at a skateboard park with other people. I was really into the sport just because you didn't have to have a coach. I really wasn't that. I didn't do that well at like basketball or baseball or football or any of those things. So skateboarding really brought me in. And when my dad found this skateboard park, he said, "Hey man, I think you'll really like this. There's a lot of other kids like you that are into it." And I went there, and I remember I was totally taken back and fully, scared. Like, wow, I don't know, And my dad was like, "Look, just go in there and check it out, just see if you dig it." And I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, what's the worst that can happen?" And I remember I went in there and I was skateboarding, and I was just very, very, taking my time and super, super hesitant. But while I was there was music being played at full volume that I'd never, ever, ever heard in my entire life. And it was, of that era, it was, Black Flag, the Circle Jerks, Sex Pistols, Ramones. But I remember a song that like I kept hearing that day, and I was like, wow, I need to find out what this is, what kind of music this was this song called Hollow Inside. And I finally went over and I kind of asked the guy, who is this? And he was like, it's the Buzzcock. And I just like ran away. Okay, cool. That's enough.
You just scurried off.
That really began. And then what ended up happening was, I was in 7th grade, and obviously I kept coming back to the skateboard park. I kept asking that same guy the name of music. So all day long I would skateboard, and at the same time I was skateboarding, I was getting this education on first wave of punk rock, and then what was ultimately the second wave, and I just absorbed it like a sponge. And it was really the perfect storm, because skateboarding, I still skateboard to this day, and skateboarding's been such a part of my life. And then obviously the music that I heard that day went on to shape the next 35 years of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so even after doing that, when did you say like, hey, do you like this kind of music? Like you're skating with your friends and your buddies and stuff, And then when did you decide to say, like, hey, I want to start a band. These guys, these Buzzcocks guys, they can rock out. The Ramones can rock out. I want to do the same exact shit. How do I do that?
Really what happened was, as I grew into skateboarding more and more and more, the parks closed down, and the parks went away in like 1983, and it all went to backyards and parking lots. And at the same time that happened, punk rock really hit the suburbs. Bands like the Circle Jerks, bands like Social Distortion, the first wave of GBH, Exploited, all these bands were making their way. Peter and Test Tube Babies, Addicts, they were all making their way over to the United States. And at the same time, being in the Bay Area, everyone from Los Angeles was coming up to do shows, like I said, and everyone was touring. And I was really in the right place at the right time when, like, Minor Threat and 7 Seconds and Youth Brigade all played in the Bay Area. That was like, That was a game changer. Minor Threat and 7 Seconds were two of the most influential bands in my life. I loved everything about those bands. Youth Brigade, huge influence, musically for me, lyrically for me. Those bands were so important to me. The Adolescents, all of that stuff. So what ended up happening was, I was now probably 15, 16 years old, and I was going to these shows all the time. I was the kid that would pay $7, and I would just be up front from the moment the first band went on stage to the last band. And I was just so into it, and it turned into this thing where, I remember there was a dude that worked at the club, and it was in between bands one night, and I was just like up front, and he just straight up said to me, he goes, "Gosh, man, are you in a band?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "You should be." And
you're always here.
Yeah, he was literally like, "You're here all the time. Every weekend you're here." And also, he was like, "You go nuts when these bands play. Like, you're so into it." And he goes, "You're more into it than some of the people in the band." And I was like, "Really?" He goes, "You should start a band." And it was one of those moments where I just was like, you know what? Why don't I? And and it was the classic thing. You start talking to different people, and before you know it, you're in someone's living room, and their parents are gone, and you're like, "Hey, let's try to write a song." And there you go. And that was the beginning. And the first band I was in, I was 15 years old, and I played bass, and that's where it all started, and it just kept. And then at that point, so then after I got into my first band, I was just in hook, line, and sinker. I mean, I was addicted. I was like, that's all I wanted to do. All I wanted to do from the time I was 15 to probably the time I was 33 years old. All I wanted to do was skateboard, go to shows, and play in my band. That's all I wanted to do. And then when I got older, all I wanted to do is play in my band and go on tour. That's all I wanted to do. That was my whole life's.
That was your goal, your journey.
That was my goal. Yeah, just to be in a band and to be able to tour and do it again and again and again and again. And I did it, like I said, up until I was like 33 years old in a band. And it was great, man. I mean, I got to go so many great places. I got to play with all the bands I loved. I got to meet so many people that I admired. I got to play with so many musicians that I became really good friends with and still are friends with. And it was awesome. And I really, it's funny because I'm glad, like, my goals were obtainable because, that's all I wanted to do. So I feel really fortunate that I actually got to do what I set out to do.
See, because you were with Wax and 22 Jacks, right?
Yep.
So, are there any talks of any kind of like reunions or anything like that with either one of the bands?
No, just because Wax and 22 Jacks. I mean, gosh, now those bands are super. It's just from another time, and everyone in the band. I just don't. What it is? I just don't really have any desire to play music. Like I just don't. And when you're the singer, you got to be the one to lead the charge.
Right,
right. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like no one's knocking on my door to be like, "Hey, dude, let's get the band back together." Not because we're not friends, because I'm still friends with all those people. But I think everyone knows, like, yeah, Joe's really into stand-up comedy. We see him doing that, and that's really what he likes doing. And I get to be on stage, and I get the same fulfillment from doing stand-up that I got from being in a band, and I love that, but I never really, it's weird because my son always says to me, why aren't you in a band anymore? I wish you were in a band. I just don't have that desire to do it. I love music, but I just don't have the desire to like sing.
Well, I mean, when you were doing it, you were pretty damn good doing it. So that's awesome.
It. I did. I loved it. I mean, that's the one thing is that I never had a bad experience. Like I never like, oh God, I didn't, this ended bad, so that's why I stopped playing music. It was almost like the universe gave me X amount of shows to do as a singer, and it was like, imagine like, I used up all of those shows, and literally to the last one. Like I remember when I walked off stage playing in 22 Jacks, I literally knew, you know what, this is it. Like I'm done. I'm not.
Oh really?
Like,
you had it like immediately off?
I knew to the moment I put the mic in the mic stand that night that like this was done. I was like, you know what, I'm done doing this. Like I gotta take a break, and I don't think I'm going to be coming back. Only because not like some big emotional like, oh God, it didn't turn out the way I wanted. I was just like, I was 33 years old. I was married. I hadn't had a family yet, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to postpone having kids anymore, so that I can go out on the road and be in the middle of nowhere in a Motel 6 with a band. Like I was like, you know what? I don't know if it was, if I just had run that course.
Did you feel kind of like burnt out?
I felt totally burnt out. Totally. 100% burned out. And I was playing with great guys, and they all went on to do great things. I mean, 22 Jacks, Steve Soto. I mean, that guy's a powerhouse, man. I mean, he's in the adolescence. He's in Manic Hispanic, or he was, and, he's always creating music. And then you got Jose. He's in the Breeders. He has his own drum shop in Portland. He's always writing. Then you got Chris Shippa. He went on to do the Foo Fighters. Then you got Scott, who went on to do Face to Face. It's like everyone that I played with, Kelly Lemieux. I mean, all these people. I mean, they all went on to do great things musically. So it definitely wasn't that band was out of. You
seem like a pretty good conduit. So do you think maybe you and I can start a band and then?
As long as we don't have to practice and move any gear, I'm totally down.
Well, I'll just do it kind of like the way the Postal Service does it, where I'll just send you a track and then you listen to it, play over it, send me the track back, and we'll just do it like that, and we'll go from there.
That already sounds like too much work. Sorry, I don't know.
Hi, it's me, Alex, host of the Finding SideOneDummy podcast. I just wanted to take a moment in the middle of this wonderful episode and say thank you for tuning in. I know it's old school, right? But it's true. There are literally thousands of podcasts out there, and you could be listening to any one of them at this moment, but you aren't. You chose this one, and I'm truly grateful, so thank you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And if you enjoy what's being played in your ears this far, why keep it to yourself? You gotta spread the word. If you have a few seconds, please take a moment to rate the show and write a little whimsical review about it. Or you know what, maybe you hate the show, but just know I don't hate you. I love you. I love you very, 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 very much. But you don't have to take my word for it. Yes, another old school phrase.
Hey there, Randy Jason Sklar here, and you are listening to us on the podcast Finding SideOneDummy.
Hey, this is Bill Watterson, and you're listening to Finding SideOneDummy. And if you're us, then what the hell's wrong with you? And how the fuck did you get this fucking message?
Be sure to follow the show on Twitter and Instagram under the name @FindingSideOneDummy. Or if you really want to get saucy, email me any sorts of complaints, concerns, praises, rants, what have yous, to findingstacks@gmail.com. And for additional content, you can visit www.findingstacks.com. Now go on, enjoy the show. All right.
I think that's one of the reasons I love doing comedy is that, like, I didn't realize it, but I just love the idea of, like, I just get to, like, I write down some ideas, I go out there and I do it. If it works, it's on me. And if it doesn't work, it's just on me. It's not like I have 3 other people saying, what the hell were you doing? Why'd you say that? Why'd you do that? It's just me, So that's one of the perks. But I still love music so much. And the other thing is I'm so proud of all the stuff I did with Wax. I'm so proud of all the stuff I did with 22 Jacks. I mean, we made some great records, and people, I was so fortunate that people liked them, and I just feel really grateful for those times.
Well, I mean, that's good. I mean, and then for you to give other aspiring musicians the opportunity that you had, and to put them on a label of your own, because you're co-founder of SideOneDummy, right? So
say again.
I said because you were the co-founder, correct?
Yeah. My partner and I started it together 23 years ago.
Yeah, and so you've gotten bands like, I don't know, maybe like Flogging Molly. I don't know who those guys are, or Gaslight Anthem. I mean, those guys are nobodies. I'm just kidding. Those are all.
I've been the thing that what I realized when I stopped playing music was I was like, what I'm really good at is it goes back to that art. It goes back to the pizza parlor story. I realized at a certain point, and I accepted it. Hey, I'm really good at setting up music and opportunities for other bands. I'm really good at that. And you know what? Instead of being the guy that fights it, oh no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do that as well as still continue trying to figure out what I want to do artistically. And it's always been a balance for me, I've always, like right now, I do stand-up full-time, but I also run SideOneDummy Records full-time. And people always say, how do you do both? And I'm like, you know what? I have to do both, because if I don't, I get bored of one or the other. If I wasn't doing stand-up, I'll get bored of SideOneDummy. If I'm not doing SideOneDummy, I'll get bored of stand-up. I love doing a million things at all times.
That's awesome. Do you feel like if you just stop moving, you're just going to just fall apart?
Yeah, what ends up happening for me is if I stop moving, I start to think. And when I start to think and I have time on my hands to think, then all of a sudden I can go down the rabbit hole and start looking around at all the things that aren't happening and start focusing on, like, why isn't this going on? And then get really, really negative. Whereas if I have my, if I have the opportunity where I'm like, hey, I'm working on this record at SideOneDummy, and we're really excited because we're releasing The Warriors, and everything's going on with that. And Nako, has a new record coming out. Okay, and I'm working on that. And then that night, I'm going to go work on, some bits and new material at the Improv, and then I'm getting ready to go to Seattle to tell jokes, and then next week I'm going to go see. Like, I just like having all those things going on because they really feed all the creativity of each one.
So how supportive is your wife? I mean, she's known. We've been together. We've been married. We've been married 19 years, and then we dated for 7. So we've been together 26 years. She's known. She's known this. She only knows this lifestyle from the very beginning, and she's been. The word supportive doesn't even apply to our relationship. This is our lifestyle, and her and I have been through the whole ride together. So it's not even like supportive in the sense of like, oh great, Joe's doing his thing. It's just she just knows that that's your everyday life, right?
Yeah, she's just like she knows. Yeah, my husband has slick back hair. He's about 5'4". He's a little Italian dude. Oh, and he's always doing a million things. He's left-handed. And he's doing a million things at all times. It's just a description. It's not even. I don't even think anyone in my family's aware of it.
That's crazy. I applaud her. I applaud you, of course, and then to keeping it strong, and then having the kid. I mean, how special do the kids see you as? Like my dad's kind of like a Superman, basically, because he's done all this shit.
Say again.
I said, how do your kids feel about you as far as like, I mean, they go to school and stuff, and do the friends know kind of what you do and what you've been through? And
oh, totally. Like when my kids were younger, it was kind of like, it was like my dad was in a band, my dad owns a record label, my dad's on the radio, my dad's a comedian. It was kind of like whatever. But like now, I got a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old, so it's definitely like, and because of YouTube and because of, all of there's a ton of videos out there of me doing stand-up, so their friends see that, their teachers see that, their friends' parents see that. So there's a lot of like, oh wow, you're a comedian, and then the people come to shows and all that, and then there's all the videos of the bands and stuff. So now for my kids, I think now like tonight I'm doing a show at the Improv, and I'll bring my son and his friend, and they'll hang out, eat nachos. My son knows a ton of the comedians that perform, and they all love him, and I like having him around it. I'm there with him, so like tonight will be a perfect example. Him and his friend will come, they'll go to the show with me, and then I'll let them see the comics before me, and they'll like eat some nachos and chill, and then they'll watch my set, and then maybe another comic afterwards, and then I get them out of there by 9 o'clock. But I love my son being around that because he's a musician himself, so he starts to see the way a show's supposed to work and the way there's a flow to the whole night, and it's a learning experience.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask next. Is he getting that same itch or that same like ambition do you see that same ambition that you had back in your teenage years? Do you see the same thing in him moving forward, like wanting to be, grow a band or be a comedian or anything like that?
Oh, he's totally a musician. He plays piano. He's definitely going down the road of being a performer. He's definitely a singer, songwriter. He's a ripper.
Oh, that's awesome. But none of those famous magic tricks, nothing like that?
No magic. There's been no magic involved yet.
Yet.
That is the key word, dude. It might happen today. He might, for all I know right now, he might be at the magic store and he's going to come home with like the box of tricks and just be like, dude, this is my decision. This is what I'm doing. Help me do some magic right now.
Well, whenever I think of magic stores, I always remember that Pee-wee, the Pee-wee movie, when he goes into that store and starts chewing that black gum. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I used to love all those magic stores.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been to one. I guess I should just to check it out. I take my kids there. So what would you look for in signing? Because when you are you involved in the process and signing of the bands any longer? For
Where I'm at right now, I'd say where I'm at with the signing of the bands is it's definitely like, I would say the A&R is led by the people that work at Side One. Like they're bringing in a lot of the bands, they're bringing in a lot of the new music that we're working with. But where my place is right now is I was really good at signing bands, and I had a really good way of doing that. But what I feel like now is I've been really good at helping hire the people to work at Side One, and the people that work at SideOneDummy are super lifestyle music heads. I mean, they just love music no different than I did, and they're bringing in a lot of the bands. And then my gig is right now is just to kind of be the person that's able to kind of maybe ask the question or look at it through a different set of lenses that maybe they're not looking at it through, and help facilitate what they're trying to do with the bands. That's my job now.
So what are you looking for? So if any bands are out there that are trying to, put their music out to a record label, I'm not saying for everybody to send everything to you or to the record label, but what do you first generally, what do you look for in a band? And then what kind of like tips or advice you can give to
a band that's connecting, man. We work with all different styles of music. If you look at our roster, it goes from, Jeff Rosenstock to AJJ to Naco Bear. It's like we love all different styles of music, and it's just it really comes down to just a band and their vision, and if they're connecting with an audience.
Yeah, so like the hardworking bands, the ones that are just always out there on the road.
Yeah, or hardworking bands, but you can be a hardworking band and not connect with an audience.
I guess that's kind of true.
I was in one of those bands for 6 years before I moved to LA. So like, I would say, a band that's making a connection with an audience, and it doesn't have to be an audience with like thousands of people. Just like, wow, man, like they're really connecting with these 50 people. They're really connecting with these 100 people. That's what we're looking for.
That's awesome. So, how do they usually get that out to you? Are they? Does it still go through like obviously?
If you go to SideOneDummy.com, there's a link on there that tells you it's like questions and facts. Like, hey, I want to get my music to Side One, and you click on that. I'll tell you what to do.
Oh, sweet. Okay, cool. Because I'm just taking notes so that way whenever you and I start a band, that I know how to upload my.
We're gonna send it to Side One.
Yeah, exactly. So moving away from the music, I know you're kind of short on time, but just the Rad Parenting, like that is such an awesome podcast to listen to.
Thank you, man.
I love it, and I also love just because I wouldn't consider myself like super punk rock. I didn't have like the wear the chains and stuff like that, but I've always been a fan of like pop punk, I guess. So I've always kind of found myself hanging out with more of the punks rather than jocks. That's for sure. So seeing movies like the Other F Word, and then finally catching your show, the Rad Parenting, I was like, oh man, this is like a way more in-depth conversation about. It's not just an hour-long movie. This is hours of content that people can listen to.
I know.
It is so awesome. I mean, you give your advice, and then you have because who's Anea? What is her background?
Anea wrote a book called 9 Ways That We Are. What is it? I have it right here. Hold on one second. Right here. Oh, here it is. 9 Ways That We're Screwing Up Our Girls and How We Can Stop. 9 Ways How We're Screwing Up Our Girls and How We Can Stop. She wrote this book, and it did really well. And she's got a master's degree. She's got a bachelor's in degree, and she's just like, her whole background is child development. And I met her a few years ago, and we just kind of hit it off. And I was thinking of starting a podcast, and everyone was kind of talking about, hey, you should do something on music. And I was just I was like, well, I kind of feel like I got that territory covered. And then I was like, you know what, I want to try to start something different. There's too many music podcasts. There's definitely too many comedy podcasts, or not too many. There's enough music podcasts, in my opinion, enough comedy podcasts. I don't know if anyone wants that from me. So then I was like, you know what if we did a parenting podcast, did something like that. And we set up some microphones. Her and I had a good vibe together. And we just started, and now we're coming up on starting our 3rd year. We're at 83 episodes, and I'm super, super proud of it because I only wanted to start doing the parenting podcast just to kind of, maybe increase getting people to come out and see me do comedy. But then what ended up happening was we really started tackling real topics, and the feedback and the emails we got, that was what changed everything, that I realized, wow, this show's really making an impression on people's lives. And what I realized was no one can afford, that no one has the time and no one has the money to get to sit down with someone like Anea that has the huge experience and someone that's done the research and has the time like she has. No one has that money.
And especially someone that has a child, right?
Yeah.
It's not just someone that's just talking. She lives it.
She has 2 kids. I have 2 kids. So it really was like the perfect thing when we started doing it. But like I said, I never, ever, ever thought. I mean, the emails we get. If you just read the reviews on the iTunes page on the show, which is almost at 100, it's insane. I mean, people really, really love the show, and I'm so blown away that it's had the impact it does. And I also now it's turned into, as much as I love it, it's also, I feel like, a responsibility now of ours because people are really counting on it each week to have something. I mean, I get emails from people that say they've changed the way they've parented from listening to this podcast, which that means there's a child or children that their lives are now altered in a different way because of this podcast we do out of my garage. Like, that to me just is insane. And if I think about it too much, I start to feel sick. Because I'm like, oh my gosh. But I always, Anea is so great and so smart, and people really identify with her because she doesn't come off. She doesn't come off as a know-it-all, and she definitely. What I love about the show is we always say to people, you know, if you're looking for a show that's going to paint everything that Anaya and Joe are great parents, then this isn't the place for you, because we're going to tell you about some mistakes we've made, and I'll be honest with you, some of the mistakes are bad.
Oh no, I know, because I listened, and one of the main ones was the calling someone pussy. And,
a pussy. Yeah, that was an episode I didn't want to do. Like, I really didn't want to do that episode, and I was so like, you know, it was too, you know, I mean, straight up, it was too close to home, literally. Like, that happened in my home, and you know, for the people listening to the podcast right now, it was basically about an afternoon where my son and I were driving back from baseball practice. He had struck out like for 3 weeks in a row. He was really, really being like upset at himself, but then it turned into like him just not, the front of his brain isn't developed enough to understand, hey man, you're having a bad streak right now. It escalated into a yelling match. That escalated into me saying, you know what, man, you're acting like a pussy. Get over it. And then right there, realizing, dude, you can't use, do you really want to continue, with
because that's just going to spiral down into something like way more deeper.
Yeah, and it was the thing that was like, so, right there in the car, I pulled over and I was just like, dude, check it out. All right, here's the deal. What the word that I just used, wrong choice of words. Secondly, I just blew it. Thirdly, I'm a human being. I got upset. What I wanted to say to you is check it out. Get over it. You're complaining. You're sounding like a whiner. You're not doing anything, but you're whining about. You're making yourself the victim here. You struck out. That's what life's about. You're gonna if you can't strike out for 3 weeks in a row. Wait, life's gonna
wait till real life hits.
Yeah, but the thing was, when we did the show, what ended up happening was I didn't want to do the show because I didn't want to be the guy to say that. And what ended up happening was Anaya talked me into doing it, and it was funny because we sat on that episode for a few weeks. Like, I didn't want to release it. I was like, and she's like, Joe, I'm telling you, you have to release this episode because you didn't say you called him a pussy and then you were like, yeah, what's wrong with that? You were like, oh, dude, I blew it. She's like, that's a huge thing. And when we released that episode, the feedback we got, it was a game changer. Like, we got emails from all over the place of parents that said, God, I feel so much better. You think you blew it? Look what I said. And and then people were like, you're absolutely right. You have to take that moment and you have to use it as a teachable moment and the rest of the episode was about how you can show your kids that mom and dad can make mistakes, but they fix them. So instead of your kids going through life saying things that they regret and saying things and making mistakes and not apologizing and not realizing that they need to fix the rupture. That was the whole.
Yeah, right. And then it shows accountability. Right, it's not just pawning something off. Like me personally.
When we did that show, but when we did that show, like, and as you can tell, I was super on the fence because I was like, man, I don't know. But it ended up being such a great experience.
Were you on the fence because you didn't want people to think like less of you, or just because of?
I was on the fence. No, dude, I don't care what people think about me. I was embarrassed. I was just embarrassed.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, it was just me feeling like, God, that's a lame thing to do, And then what it didn't realize, and if you listen to the episode, is Naya, and I didn't know she was going to do this. She also told a story about her calling her older daughter, like, you're acting like a bitch.
Oh, yeah, that goes vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah, so it made me, and I didn't realize that was part of her story, and that made me feel a lot better. Like, oh, wow,
yeah.
Like Anaya, and because I was like, wow, like, you called her, and she goes, yeah, I said, you're acting like a bitch, to her teenage daughter or something, and she's like, I know the feeling you have, and then that was, that made me feel a lot better. And I just didn't want to, I also, I just was embarrassed that I said that. But it was also like,
I think it's a fantastic episode, and me personally, I don't use the word anymore just because of what you and then I don't want to give away too much. Like I want people to go out and listen to it. But yeah, it's just degrading, and then you go into details of why and how it actually should mean something different. So I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah, totally. But. The real whole thing was that when you're calling someone a pussy, you're actually calling them a vagina, and you're saying you're less than you're being less than you can be by being a pussy. And pussy is a slang word for vagina. But what I realized was the vagina is probably we're not, you and I aren't having a conversation without vaginas in this world. The vagina is the strongest piece of a human being that exists because it has to give birth. And anyone that's been in the room with a woman giving birth, that is the most insane amount of pain that they have to go through. So for you to say to someone, hey man, you're acting like a pussy, what you really should be doing is when someone does something amazing, like, dude, oh my God, you're acting like you're a vagina, man. You are crushing it right now. Dude, Joe, I just saw your comedy, and there's only one word to describe you: vagina, because you're that good. You
had a vagina of a show.
Oh my God, this podcast is a vagina because it's so good and it's so groovy. And that was what I taught my son. I was like, dude, that word, we're using it. We've been using it in the context so wrong because none of us are on this planet without that, and it really goes back to ending this whole myth that women are less than men. I mean, dude, women are so much radder than men. I mean, think about it. The thing you still don't understand is, a man and woman don't make the same amount of money getting paid. I mean, a woman gives birth to a baby, and then she makes less money than a man at the same job. I mean, she should be the fact that she does give birth. There should be a bonus that year. Like when you come back
right, exactly.
from maternity leave, when you come back from maternity leave, your boss should cruise in and be like, hey, dude, here's another $2,000 because I know how gnarly that is.
Yeah.
But no,
I couldn't do that.
And it's like, it's the whole thing of women and their menstrual cycle. Oh God, dude, she's on her period. Like we did a whole show on that about how much of a bunch of BS that is, because that's the gift of life right there. And what I try to do with the show, with Rad Parenting, and not to go off on like a crazy tangent,
no, go ahead.
is that I wanted Rad Parenting to have the effect on our listeners as it has on me. I wish I would have started Rad Parenting 10 years ago, because I would have been a better dad. I would have been a better father. I would have been a better husband, because I have learned so much from doing the show, from the questions that the listeners ask us, to listening to Anea. And it's really made me a better person, because I have information now, and all I wanted it to be was a resource for other men and other women that are going through life, and they're trying to make ends meet, and they're trying to work, and they have no time to do anything. That all that they do is they upload the podcast. They're short too. They're not like, they're not 3-hour, dramas. They're 20 minutes. They're 40 minutes at most.
Yeah, I think the longest one I've seen is like 42 minutes or something. It's not very long.
And the thing I love about it is that I love it because I always want it to be loose and fun, but then I want it to get serious for a minute. I really want it to have some meat and potatoes, and then I want it to end with a recap of what you had. So when it ends, you go, oh, okay, got it. This is what I need to work on, A, B, and C. Not like sometimes, you listen to a podcast and you're like, oh my God, it was so long, I don't even know what they're talking about anymore. I didn't want it to be like.
I'm going to agree with you. I wish that your podcast, Rad Parenting, was available 10 years ago, because they would have explained to me how difficult it is. My daughter's about to turn 9 years old. And so I didn't know. I mean, I guess I've read books like the, what is that book that's called, like How to Be a Parent or whatever it is.
There's a lot of books.
Yeah, I skimmed through some of them. I mean, I didn't go into detail because I just kind of just went and skipped to like the father part, and I was like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
You know. But it doesn't really give you a lot of detail on how like really difficult it is. Or maybe I did get it. I just didn't retain the knowledge.
Also yeah. And it's also when you're reading it, you're like, okay, I guess that's going to happen at a certain point. And one of the things we love to do on Rad Parenting is, we talk about real things that just, we talk about real, like one of my favorite episodes is, why, my daughter stopped talking to me from the age of 12 until like 14, and I was like so bummed on that because we were, her and I were like best friends all the way up there. And then, and Naya explained to me, like, this is what's going on. This is what's, hormonally going on. This is her relationship with her father's going to change. And, and it's going to come back. And sure enough, now it's 16 years old, and her and I are, we're back, you're back communicating together. And also, teaching you just what you're supposed to do during those time periods. But I love doing the show. It's been a blast. And like I said, I never anticipated it being something that would be as big as the responsibility as it's turned into.
Well, it's a vagina of a show, and I love it.
You know what, man? It is, and that's
So I know you got to go. I said that a couple minutes ago, but just a couple more questions, and one of them that I just
no worries, dude.
I just really want to know if what dream show would you put together? If you can name 3 bands, they could be alive or no longer, or they've been disbanded. It could be like a Jimi Hendrix. It can be the whole Ramones. It could be any 3 bands. Can you name them from the opening bands, the 2 opening bands, and then the headliner? What would be your favorite show?
Two openers. Yeah, I'll tell you right now. Well, I know this. I want to have AC/DC original lineup: Bon Scott, Angus Young, Malcolm Young, Phil Rudd, and the bass player. It'll come to me in a second. So that original lineup.
You want them opening?
No. I think let me figure it out. So AC/DC's on the bill with Bon Scott. That's definitely, and Cliff's playing bass, so it's the original lineup, and it'd be like circa like Jailbreak era, like that record Jailbreak. That could be like that. That's the era that I'd want to see him. So there you go. And then let me see.
Well, and if you want to, you can also do like a bonus, like who's running the merch table. You can do that too.
So I definitely put AC/DC in there, and then let me think. AC/DC, and then I would say, let me see. I know this is gonna sound crazy, but I would have loved to have seen Elvis Presley in like the era of Suspicious Minds and like all those songs. Like it's not before he gets super heavy, but like right before. Like he definitely is doing karate moves on stage. Like I need to see that. I need to see.
You need to see flying tassels, a lot of tassels.
Yeah, I definitely want to see some flying tassels. I definitely want to see some the sunglasses with like the ruby. Like I want to see all of that, and I want to hear Suspicious Minds and In the Ghetto, but I also want to hear classics like Love Me Tender and all that. So I want to see him. So then you got him and AC/DC. Okay, I don't know the order of the bill yet. And then also on the bill, I want to see the Replacements, but I want to see a good show. I don't want to see where we get super wasted and we throw our deli tray on everyone. Like, I don't want to see that show. I want to see, like, one of those rare nights where, like, maybe they got
everybody
so
sober?
Yeah, like one of those nights that happens when they were so bad and so terrible in Detroit because they got so wasted, so that now they're in Chicago the next night and they're like they're still so bummed that they blew Detroit apart and they know they can't ever go there. So they're like, for one night, they're like, you know what? Like they're still contemplating. We'll probably drink after the show. So now I get to see them fully sober and fully in the moment. Like that would be amazing. So far we got the Replacements, we got Elvis, we got AC/DC. As much as I'd love to say, then it's a toss up between the Clash and the Ramones, because I would have loved to have seen the Clash in in that first record era, where before they make the first record, and they do all that.
Before their prime, before they hit the.
I would say I don't want to. I don't need to see the Clash when they're opening for the Who. That doesn't really excite me. But seeing them, when they're like just about to maybe record that first record, like I'd love to see that, or I'd also like to see the Ramones. Like by the time I started seeing the Ramones, they were great. And it was great to see them, but they definitely, I would have loved to have seen them, in between the first record and say Rocket to Russia and Road to Ruin. I would have loved to have seen them on the Road to Ruin tour. That's my favorite record. So those two things. I mean, but I got to see all those bands. I never got to see a Clash, but I got to see the Ramones. I got to see the Damned. I can't really use them for this thing. So I'd say, I think right there, unless there's I think for me,
so you'll do like a Clash or Ramones, like a little side stage, and then.
Yeah, I don't want to put them on a side stage. I think.
Okay, when do 4? You can do 4.
How about this?
5.
How about this? No. I just want the Ramones and the Clash in that era hanging out at the show for AC/DC, Elvis Presley, and the Replacements. So they're in the crowd. We're drinking together.
Oh man, that's awesome. I like that detail.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
That's awesome, dude. So before we finish everything, what 2 moments in throughout your entire life, not just your career, but just entire life, stick out to you the most?
In which respect of I didn't hear that part yet.
I'm saying it could be career or just in your own personal life. Other than the kids being born, we want that's already a given.
Yeah, two moments that stick out of my life. When I look back on them. A lot of people say, "Oh, the birth of my kids," or getting married.
Yeah, those are givens.
Those moments are amazing, and they're kind of they're given that they're going to be life changers.
Right. Those are gimmies.
Yeah, I would say, real game changers and real the real things that I look back on and I go, wow, if that wouldn't have happened, then the rest wouldn't have happened. I would say, and it's not a good thing, but when I was 23 years old, I got kicked out of the band I was in Northern California, and at the time, it seemed like the worst thing in the world. I couldn't believe that it was over, and that ended up getting me to get off my ass and move away from Northern California and move to Southern California and try to go, all right, I gotta leave here because this isn't happening. I'll try LA, and that was, the rest is history. I came down here, and everything happened, and then what would be another game-changing, moment would be going to a show, and I was at the Coconut Teaser, and I went I was hanging out, and I ran into a buddy of mine, and it was actually Chris Shiflett, who's in the Foo Fighters, and at the time, he's just he's not in the Foos, he's just another dude, and I was looking for a roommate, and he goes, hey man, we need someone to live with us. Come live with us. And I go, okay. And I thought I'd be splitting a room with Chris because he was my friend. Well, he goes, no, you're going to split a room with Bill. And I go, who's Bill? And he goes, oh, dude, you're going to split a room with him. He needs a roommate. So we were splitting a room together. I'd never met this guy in my entire life. And that ended up being Bill Armstrong, who I started SideOneDummy with.
That is fucking awesome.
And I would have never, if I wouldn't have went to that show that night, and if I wouldn't have said, yeah, Chris, I'll come over to your house. I brought all my stuff. Okay, I'm moving in. He goes, hey, you're living with Bill. And I'm like, who's that? And then if I wouldn't have said, okay, I wouldn't have met Bill, and we wouldn't have started Side One. And all of the last 23 years and the 500 plus records we've put out and all the things we've done together, none of that would have happened if I wouldn't have went to the Coconut Teaser that night.
Man, and then plus it's a cool name, Coconut Teaser. But man,
Yeah.
dude, that's awesome. That's deep, man. I mean, how did Bill feel about you when he first met you? Because you were like a little firecracker.
Well, we're both the same. We're both the same. It's funny. We're both the same guy in a million ways, and we're both a different guy in a million ways.
That makes no sense to me.
You know what I'm saying? Like we're similar. We're similar in so many ways. Like when it comes to music and what we like about an artist and what we might not care for and what we think's important. And then when it comes to like down to little weird things of like eating food and like I could order for him and he could order for me because we just sat together for so many years. But then we're the total opposite. Bill's a very what would I say? When we were kids, we all called him the voice of reason. He was the voice of reason. When you had a problem when you were a kid, you go talk to Bill because Bill was like we used to nickname him Grandpa because he was just a smarter, well-spoken guy. Whereas no one has ever said, "Hey, go talk to Joe Sid. He's the voice of reason." No one's ever said that. It's like go talk to Joe if you want to figure out how to get 6 cases of beer for free. Like we got to talk to that guy, dude. Go talk to Joe if you want to figure out how we light the fireworks off at the same time we hit the stage. That's more of my department. Whereas people aren't going to ask Bill those questions.
That is awesome, man. Well, dude, I completely really appreciate you doing this. Like I said, taking the time and doing this for me and for the show, and I look forward to more of what you got going on. And what are your plans that you got within the next few months?
Well, man, I got the thing I want to say. Dude, you've thanked me so many times, man. The pleasure's all mine. I appreciate you taking the time to your questions were great. You were prepared. I love that. But man, it goes both ways. Thank you so much for taking the time. Right now the future for me is, I'm finishing out the rest of the year. I'm going to Seattle. I'm going to Portland. Then I go out to I do the Warped Rewind comic. I do stand up on the Warped Rewind cruise in October.
Yeah, that's coming down.
Yeah, so I'm doing that. In the beginning of December, I do Austin, San Antonio, and Houston.
Well, I live in San Antonio. So.
Oh, seriously? Okay, yeah. So I'm in San Antonio. According to my schedule, I will be in San Antonio on Sunday, December 3rd.
All right. Well, I guess I'll be there.
Yeah, and where, I don't know, but stay in touch with me and we'll hook it up.
Yeah, dude, definitely.
And I really appreciate the time today. And once again, man, sorry for the back and forth, but we finally did it. And it was great. I loved it.
Oh, perfect, dude. I appreciate it. I'll see you soon. And like I said, take it easy, man, and keep doing what you're doing. Podcast, your comedian.
Let me know when this airs so I can get the word out.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I will, for sure.
Thanks for everything, buddy.
All right, thanks, Joe.
Take care, boss.
You too, Bye. Well, how fucking cool was that?